Good people don't smoke marijuana.
I've known Larry for a long time.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
This is the Medical Marijuana Radio Show with Larry Love. Our love. I got something here for you and me. Oh yeah, it's a medical marijuana. Whoa, whoa. I got something here for you and me. Oh yeah, it's a medical marijuana. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of Medical Marijuana Radio. This week we're going to be talking to Shele. She is a cannabis wellness coach. She's a patient in the medical cannabis world. We're going to talk about fibromyalgia. We're going to talk about bipolar and MS and traumatic brain injury, among other things. So we'll be right back with Shele right after this. This is the Medical Marijuana Radio Show with Larry Love. And today we have Shele here. She's a cannabis wellness coach and a cannabis coach, and we're going to talk about bipolar. We're going to talk about how to get this great medicine of cannabis into the hands and the homes of the people that need it. So welcome to Medical Marijuana Radio, Shele.
Thank you so much for having me.
Anyway, I heard you last night on Clubhouse, and it was a wonderful conversation. Let's start off with how you got interested in using cannabis as a medicine, and then we'll get into all the areas that you excel in.
Okay, well, ironically enough, through high school, I was a typical DARE kid. I was so against drugs, drinking and driving. And when I got to college, I opened my thoughts up a little more, and I tried cannabis recreationally and enjoyed it, but wasn't a regular user. And fast forward a few years, I started getting diagnosed with autoimmune issues, and I was diagnosed with MS. And at the time, medical marijuana was not legal here in the state of New Jersey. So there was no option to medicate naturally. And I had to experience a lot of medications that messed with your liver, and had to constantly have my liver numbers monitored, have Botox injections into my legs anywhere there was spasticity. And once medical marijuana became available for people that had MS and some very few other problems, that I sat down with my neurologist, and he is a very conservative bow tie wearing man every day. And I pitched it to him, and he turned around and he said, absolutely, I think that you should do it. And that's where my journey began. And the problem at that point was, okay, you get this card and the physician says, you qualify, here you go to the dispensary. You don't get any education from the actual prescribing physician. At least in my case, I didn't. Went to the dispensary, and I sat down and I asked the person, and you get a half an hour here to go over your history with them. And during that half an hour, I discussed what I needed it for spasticity, for pain, insomnia. And I was given blanket suggestions. And I also have a medical background. So before I got sick, I was going back to school to be a physician assistant for orthopedic surgery. So that medical knowledge kind of like put a light above my head saying, well, how can you suggest one particular chemovar or strain over another when neuropathic pain is completely different than orthopedic pain? So you can't treat them the same way with the same chemovar necessarily, because it works differently. And that started me going onto the path of learning how to use cannabis as medicine for myself. And then one day I was watching a few documentaries, and found out that there was such a thing called a cannabis coach. And the man that was in the documentary happened to be a retired Las Vegas police officer
Wow.
that, yeah, was amazing. That was used to arresting people for the very medication he now teaches people how to use. And that was it for me. I dove in, I got certified through CCI, Cannabis Institute, and also through Dr. Sulek's program, Healer. And then between that and my medical knowledge, just put it all together. And now I help people, number one, not waste money and time at a dispensary trying to figure out what dose, what chemovar, how to use it. Do they smoke? Do they ingest? There's so many different ways. There's such a science behind it. So that's what I do. I enjoy helping people learn how to use this amazing plant as medicine.
Of course, this is all new. We learn things every day that's new about this plant. That's what
Absolutely.
the thing is. As long as, I've been using this plant for 53 years this month, and I'm learning every day. So it's like it's exciting and so forth. So multiple sclerosis is a uh, syndrome or disease. I'm not sure what what it's.
It's an autoimmune disease. Yes.
So a lot of people have it. I have some personal friends that have it. So can you like tell me your routine and how it works for you? I know that it works differently for everybody. Of course, uh,
Sorry,
it's okay.
I forgot to turn that off.
Everyone's body is so totally different.
Yes.
And so for you, your routine, how is it helping with your multiple sclerosis? And is it like staving off progression, which is like one of the most important things besides relief?
Very much so. And I use it with my MS. I was also taking an immune modulating medication called Tysabri, which was an infusion. And I was on that for 7 years, which also helps with mobility. I mean, before I started the drug, I was using a cane and a walker at 30 years old. I'm now 50, and my MS, knock on wood, has been under control. But that being said, I had to stop taking that particular medication because I was also diagnosed with a rare immune deficiency. So any biomedication that is used for autoimmune processes tends to be an immunosuppressant. So being that I was diagnosed with an immunodeficiency, I wasn't able to use that amazing drug anymore. And I was extremely scared that I was going to regress and go back to having to use assistive devices and have more, because I have relapsing remitting MS, which means it goes and then it goes away. Unfortunately, some people have something called primary progressive, which it starts and it's nonstop downhill progression, or secondary relapsing remitting, which turns from where it relapses until it's starting to basically become a more involved occurrence of relapses. So with the cannabis, what it helped with me, I totally believe that I'm on a different medication called IVIG for my immune deficiency. And there have been very, few studies, but there are some anecdotal and some studies showing that the medication in IVIG, which is from donated plasma, there is some neuroprotectant value when it comes to MS as well. So that, in addition to the cannabis, which is neuroprotectant, neuroregenerative, and so many other great things for people with MS, I believe my combination of microdosing with my cannabis, in addition to my every 4 weeks, I get my IV infusion, which is about a 5-hour process on an IV pole. I absolutely believe that the cannabis, in addition to that, has protected me. Again, knock on wood, I haven't had a relapse in quite some time, and cannabis was the best thing that happened to me. I stopped having to get painful Botox injections into my legs and into my hips. So
Are there
within the first use of cannabis.
so tell me about the different ways you take the cannabis for MS. I mean, if you're feeling like, spasticity in your legs, are you using a topical, or is there a certain strain, or are you using, and you say you're microdosing. So are you microdosing
Yes.
like cannabis oil?
So what I have a couple of different ingestion methods. I personally use Durban poison during the day, and I make it into a sugar. And I just use, because again, we're so different. So what I use for myself, obviously, may not be the same for someone else. Everyone's obviously very independently, different, and their body and their endocannabinoid system reacts differently. That being said, I just put it in my coffee in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I make my own gummies, again with the Durban poison, and I'll take that in the afternoon. And my evening dose, I will switch to something like an OG Kush or gelato, something that's very relaxing, that has a lot of myrcene in it, and linalool, which tends to be very relaxing. And you're not couch locked with it, but it's an overall relaxation. And when you have MS, that spasticity is painful. It's like a 24/7 Charlie horse.
Mm.
So although I vape at night, I use a vape, a dry herb vape. And I find that because you can control your settings and your temperature, which controls what you get out of that particular strain. So people don't realize that as well. You can put a strain at 250 and just get a very calming, relaxing. But if you want to go to sleep, up it up to 395. There's so much to learn about within the strains, what works for you, what temperature, and the ingestion method. Everyone's different.
So while you're vaping, obviously, and you're moving up from lower, you're vaping different cannabinoids and
And terpenes.
at that time, and then it gets up to the THC and the CBD and so forth.
Yeah.
In my experimentation with vaping, I sort of do that. I start low, okay, and try to get those because and it tastes a lot better down there.
Hmm.
But then, the next time, you put it down, you take another hit, you raise it a little bit, and then obviously get up into the 380s, 390s. You're probably just starting to combust, so you're probably getting more of the
That THC.
cannabinoids and the THC that's in there.
Yeah.
So, and
And the one thing I love about dry vaping, I tell all of my clients that, and it's hard when you're working with a client who is cannabis experienced, because teaching them to use it as a medicine, they feel like, okay, well, I'm doing this with a microdose and I don't feel high, and I have to remind them, that's not the goal, to be high all day. The goal is to get your endocannabinoid receptors bathed with these amazing terpenes, with these amazing cannabinoids throughout the day. So a lot of users that are recreational users tend to feel that it's not working unless I'm high. And that is one of the biggest misconceptions. And also I teach them about, we talked about ingestion methods and how we do it. I tell all of my people, no more joints, no more pipes or bongs, because you are burning off those amazing terpenes. Dry vaping, in my opinion, is the best way to do it, besides a tincture for microdosing throughout the day. And or it's harder with edibles, but just to get that consistency and trying to get to that sweet spot of a therapeutic level, versus getting too much, where if you reach your upper level, you're inviting back everything that you're trying to get rid of. The pain can come back, the
right.
anxiety can be worse. So there's a sweet spot that we all need to learn in using the medicine. And there's a lot of, as Dr. Sulek says, start low, go slow, but don't be afraid to go all the way.
Right. Again, the plant reacts differently with everybody, and of course, edibles I think are very important. But not eating, a brownie is not real medical because of the sugar and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as smoking is concerned, when you have a new patient that comes to you and says, I need some wellness coaching with cannabis, I don't want to smoke. Okay, I tell them to check out Harvard's uh, uh, study that of over 5,000 people that says that smoking cannabis and vaping actually improves lung function and lung volume.
Yes,
right, which is very
it opens the alveoli, and it's very interesting because it seems counterproductive. But that being said, it has to be dry vaped in order for it to be a bronchodilator. So I actually have asthmatic clients that we've discussed this, and if they feel like they're having any bronchospasm, I actually say hit a vape because that will work as a bronchodilator and release those spasms. So it seems so counterintuitive to introduce something into your lungs. But that's how amazing this plant is, that it works on those CB1 and CB2 receptors in the lungs and on the alveoli, to expand and give them some semblance, not even some, but relief.
right. And of course, you can only the body and the lungs can only absorb so much cannabinoids at one time. So that's where I get into the fact that I think dabbing can be so wasteful for men.
Hmm.
However, can be very good for some hardcore pain people that need to get that much into them at one time. It's expensive to dab for sure. I mean, you see people, dabbing a whole gram at once, and everything you blow out of your mouth, whether it's a joint pipe, or dab, or whatever, is wasted medicine, really.
Right.
I sort of learned how to conserve back when I lived in Florida for 10 years, which was just crazy back in the 90s. You didn't want to get caught with cannabis down there for sure back then. So I learned how to conserve and dose. Dosing is most important. So when you're counseling
Yes.
a first
Hmm.
person, okay, I've had to counsel 90-year-old people. So how do you start them and talk to them if they've never had cannabis in their bodies before?
So basically, I do a complete history and physical with them. I need to know the medications that they're on. I discuss with them that this is a journey. I work with my patients and clients for 1 month, and during that month, we discuss all the different types of taking cannabis, whether it be sublingually, buccally. We've had the discussion of suppositories, um, cooking with it, but cooking healthy, not like you said, not just making brownies and gummies. And I teach them how to make their own MCT oils. My goal is to help people learn how to medicate themselves and be self-sufficient in and knowing by the time I'm done with them how they can, if how they need to titrate. I discussed tolerance breaks quite a bit. If I have someone who is a regular user, before we start, I ask them to do at least a week's worth of a tolerance break. And I explain how, as a cannabis user, our endocannabinoid receptors tend to get lined every time that we use cannabis. And when you keep on adding onto those receptors, your body is not work is taking is not body is not as accepting it as well, and that's when you start to build up your tolerance. Well, if you take a tolerance break, you are sloughing off, in a sense, the layers that have built up on your endocannabinoid receptors, your CB1 and CB2 receptors, and it's almost like a reset. So when you come back to using cannabis, your body will be like, hey, this is great. And you can use less than you used before. It will work better, and you'll notice the difference. It's just getting people to understand, okay, we're going to start very low and slow. You must be patient. I usually check in every 3 days to see, okay, and I have them keep a diary that basically says, okay, what are my pain levels? What are my mood levels before and after? And I explain to them, I'm a little different in the sense of, okay, well, here you take 5 milligrams, take 10 milligrams, whatever. In the beginning, I literally go by drops, mLs,
Mhm.
because I want them to titrate um, very slowly. I want them to really hone in on how my body's feeling after I medicate, so we can adjust accordingly. I don't want anybody to go too quickly and then get freaked out because they got too high, when that's not what the experience is that they want. I need to know, okay, well, your mood was better if it's for anxiety or depression. And I have them, so keep these diaries and we discuss them so we can work together in trying to find their sweet spot. And it's amazing once you get a person and you to pain relief or anxiety relief. I've worked with a couple of people that have completely stopped their opioids, which was huge for me. Like I cried because this person was in a bad place, a very, very bad place. And we worked them down to nothing. I had another patient who halved hers, and her pain management doctor could not believe it. And she's lucky enough to have a pain management doctor that will allow cannabis use. A lot of pain clinics don't do that. It's one or the other, which is ridiculous.
Right.
And then I had a traumatic brain injury patient whose seizures went dramatically down. So working with people from all different types of, ailments, I learned from them, they learned from me. And then you can also see across the board, wow, okay, so it works this way for, people that have anxiety, and teaching them how to microdose and how to take it for their best, the way it'll work with them, and they'll be consistent, because consistency is ultimately key.
Right. And very hard to do with cannabis because of the different growers growing the same stuff
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. So just to finish up on tolerance breaks, is a tolerance break necessarily a total abstinence for X amount of time, or just a lower dosing yourself?
No, it's a total abstinence,
And,
because anytime you put anything, a cannabinoid in, it's like I said, it's making a film on that endocannabinoid receptor. So more you use it, slough it off, and it's a fresh, brand new endocannabinoid receptor waiting to accept cannabinoids.
so I'm guessing that everybody's break is different. So is there like an average of how many days you suggest for the people that you're taking care of coaching?
It depends on the person. Obviously, if someone is in pain, severe pain, I say even if you can go for 3 days, I know what it's like to be in severe pain. I'm dealing with a torn hip labrum right now. I have metal all up and down my back from orthopedic problems. So I experience pain. And because of using cannabis, I've not taken a pain med. And I was on Dilaudid for over 5 months now,
Mm.
because I finally figured out my perfect Goldilocks dose and methods. But I took off myself. I took off about 3 weeks.
Wow.
Dr. Sulak, Dr. Fry, Dr. Bonnie Goldstein, they say up to a month if you can. But if a person can't, because sometimes it's just not feasible, 3 days, even 3 days helps.
Right. So in that same realm of things,
Mhm.
what do you feel about cannabis hyperemesis syndrome that affects very maniacal?
It's funny you bring that up. I'm working with a client right now who said to me, I was getting really nauseated and I was vomiting, and he's one of my anxiety patients. And I brought this up with him. I said, well, it's funny that you say that, because the only way we can tell really, and the studies have shown that, and there's so much controversy, whether it's the hyperemesis is really a symptom or a problem with cannabis use. And by one easy way to figure it out, if it is that versus cyclical vomiting, is get in a hot shower, get in a hot bath. If your nausea goes away, if your vomiting goes away, it's because of the cannabis. If it doesn't, then it's something else, and it's probably the cyclical vomiting.
We still don't know if it's a natural toxicity to THC,
Right.
or if it's chemicals that are in the cannabis that you are ingesting. So the jury is out on that. However, I happen to have a close friend that does get this every 18 months or so, and he just abstains for about 3 weeks, and then he's good to go. And so
Hmm.
believe it is my personal, anecdotal opinion is that it is a toxicity to overload of THC for some people. It's a very small amount of people, but it's out there, and of course, with
Yeah.
legalization in new states and people starting to use cannabis when they haven't activated their endocannabinoid system at
Yeah.
their life, it could become more prevalent, but we'll have to wait and see about
And
that.
I also wonder if terpenes have a play in that as well. I mean, is while um, you can have an adverse event because of a specific cannabinoid, you can also have an adverse event because of a terpene. I know someone who's extremely sensitive to myrcene, which unfortunately myrcene is in the majority of cannabis.
How does that person do with mangoes?
That was the next thing that we had questioned with her, and when I said, go buy a mango and let's check this out. And then also I suggested um, keeping sucking on a peppercorn for that beta carotene to see if that would counteract that. And she does that. We still are waiting to hear about because she was in the process of moving, about the mango. But but I worry about the mango because again, that would make it worse if it was the myrcene.
Well, for some people, 5, 6 years ago, they were saying if you eat a mango before you ingest an edible or even smoke, it could enhance and amplify the effect. Okay, I don't
Right.
know. So that's still to be determined and anecdotal, for sure. So since we're talking about you mentioned caryophyllene and black peppercorns and so forth. Now that's also a remedy for someone who's taken too much of an edible, or maybe is
Yes.
tripping too high, maybe on some sativa as well. So so how do you tell your coachees how to handle a bad event with an edible?
Great question. And there have been people, first of all, when I speak about edibles to people, I explain about how long the onset of action is going to be. I explain the biphasic effect on how it's going to work. I explain that you cannot, even though you have a bad experience, you cannot overdose. You're safe. Put your mindset, if you've taken overconsumed an edible, get yourself in a safe space. And the main thing that I recommend is having some CBD on hand and a vape pen or a cartridge of CBD, because that will automatically bring you down. And not many people realize that because this plant is so amazing, CBD is marijuana's or cannabis's own antidote to being too high. So if you have a vape pen available at all times with a CBD card, I say keep that. If you've had too much, hit that. If you don't have that, suck on a peppercorn. It may not be the greatest tasting, but it does the job.
Also, Neil Young, one of our favorite rock and rollers, has come out and said that he believes that inhaling the aroma from peppercorns can do it as well.
Mhm.
Now, I did have presence of mind a couple of years ago when I did take too much oil, and I said, you know what, I should try this, right? And so I did breathe in some peppercorns, and it actually gave me a rush, and I ended up hitting the floor. So,
Wow.
again, this plant and its terpenes and its cannabinoids does something different for everyone. And
Hmm.
an experienced person like you and I are with edibles. I mean, I can tolerate easy 80 to 100 milligrams of an
Yeah.
edible, okay? But again, depends what's in your stomach at the time that you eat. It depends what you eat after that.
Hmm.
When you're telling one of your patients that you're helping when to take their dose of an edible or oil or tincture, um, does it differ for each person, or do you like to tell them an empty stomach and then maybe eat something a little while after that? How do you tell them to titrate that?
Well, it depends on the person in the sense that what they're hoping to achieve. So, obviously, if you take an edible, and I usually say that edibles are great for nighttime use and also for first time people that are going to be trying an edible. I suggested taking it before, like an hour before bedtime. That way, if you do have any adverse events, and that you just it's not working well or you get too much, you're going to sleep through that.
You're in a safe place,
um
bed. You're not
yes,
all down. So
yes, but that being said, my pain patients, you want to get that duration of the cannabinoids being in your system as long as you can. And cannabis is fat loving, it's lipophilic, it loves fat. So anytime I tell people, if you want to make it last longer in your system, you can have a healthy but a fattier meal. Avocado has great fat in it. I sometimes I will infuse my own olive oil and make dinners, like throw it in my dinner, things like that. So the more fat you have in your stomach, it increases the bioavailability of the THC in your plasma levels. So it helps it stay in the body a lot longer. So when it comes for pain, that's, excuse me, specifically one of the things that I say: eat something a little fatty. That way it can last longer in your system. And even if you are ingesting it via a dry vape or sublingually through a tincture, even though it's taken that way, once it's in your system, fat will still make that last longer, because even if you're putting it sublingually, some of that, no matter how long you're holding it under your tongue or on your side of your mouth buccally, some of that's going to go down to your stomach. So there is going to be an aspect of ingestion through your stomach, and the fat there too will contribute to it being in your body longer.
yeah, I've had the experience that I'd like to figure out how to make happen purposely. But let's say I took some oil late at night, okay, and then I slept, and then the next morning I get up, I eat a piece of toast and some breakfast, and all of a sudden, boom, some latent stuff that's in my liver or somewhere. It just gets me. I go, wow, I'm high right now. And I haven't had anything but some breakfast. So uh, I'm guessing that eventually the technology will change to where we can get that. What do you call it when a pill kicks in every couple of hours? Can't think of the term right now, but you know what I'm talking about? Like you take a 20
Extended release.
extended release. Okay, thank you. So I think that's going to happen eventually with cannabis, because as you call it, say microdosing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there is an exact definition of that, but I'm thinking that like smaller doses throughout the day. Is that what you would say?
Yes, yes. And I usually have people take, like I said, low and slow, a morning dose when they wake up, and write down in their diary what they're experiencing, and then usually say, okay, a couple hours later, another small dose, do the same thing. Now, if they are not seeing results that they are looking for, I do one of two things. I either say then I either up the dose a little bit, or depending on the patient, or up the frequency. So everyone is different. Some people just need a little tweak to up the dose, and whether that be one drop more or another milliliter more, not full ml because that's 1,000 milligrams, but a 0.1, 0.2. Everyone's going to be different. So if you're dealing with a pain patient, and you're going to microdose them in the morning, afternoon, and then their evening dose, which like I said, I changed that up to a stronger dose for them so they can last through the night pain free. That being said, I always keep it out there that if they need to, in between, take a hit off of their vape, or take a little more can of sugar in their coffee or tea, then do it. That being said, if we can get you to the point where you don't have breakthrough, that's the ultimate goal. But if you do have breakthrough, I think vaping is one of the greatest ways to, or just a smaller, very smaller dose of a tincture for
Well,
breakthrough pain. But basically, that's it
vaping will you'll get some relief a little bit quicker than taking.
right away. Yeah.
So let's touch about bipolar. Okay, that's something else that you like to talk about. Tell us what bipolar condition is and how cannabis is helping with that and what the dosing is like.
Sure. And I'm still learning. So let me put that out there. I'm so thankful to have access to the wonderful doctors that we have on Clubhouse and being part of the Society of Cannabis Clinicians at my disposal. I'm blessed for that. I personally have family members with bipolar and two different types of bipolar, which even being in the medical world, I didn't know that there were two types of bipolar. I just thought that you were bipolar 1 and that's what it was. And you have phases of mania and phases of depression. That being said, I recently learned about through a family member that there's something called bipolar type 2, which cycles much quickly, much faster. So, and if when they are in the manic, that impulsivity, that gets really out of control. And depending on where they are in their mania or depression, that really changes how you're going to dose. Again, as I mentioned before, with that Goldilocks spot, if you get up to your upper range and go over that, then you can make that mania or depression 10 times worse. So that's why it's so important to be cognizant when you're using cannabis for any type of mental illness, but especially with bipolar and how it goes up and down, especially with bipolar type 2, because it cycles so quickly.
What kind of
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
which kind of cannabis is better? I mean, I know that sativas can be real good for anxiety. I don't know if anxiety and bipolar have anything to do with each other at the right dosage. So is it a sativa or an indica or a hybrid that helps bipolar people? And is it smoking it? Is it eating it? What's the
Right. Well, that's the magical question, and that's what I'm excited to talk about today, because a lot of the chemovars that are recommended for anxiety and depression can and sometimes do give you an opposite effect if you're in a manic phase. So a lot of times they'll suggest something with, like I said before, the linalool and myrcene heavy chemovars, but also it's really important to figure out your ratios with CBD and THC. So a lot of times people will tend to use, I know that Dr. Fry had said that she uses almost like an 18-to-1 CBD to THC for some of her patients, depending on where they are in their process.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I intend on picking brains about today, later on the Clubhouse room,
tricky about?
because it's tricky. It's very tricky, and there's so much that we need to learn. And again, like you said, we have such different endocannabinoid systems. It's not a one size fits all, and I think that's the hesitancy. And this was discussed the other day on one of the rooms. That's the hesitancy of doctors being afraid to become involved and learn about it, because there's so much discrepancy in dosing. And being in the medical field, you're taught to dose with specific milligrams, specific things, and you can't do that across the board when it comes to cannabis,
because it reacts differently with everybody. So
exactly.
back to what you quoted Dr. Fry said about having an 18-to-1 or 20-to-1. I mean, there's all kinds of ratios there. However, you do have to be careful, because my understanding is that CBD can actually be a major amplifier. So if you are in maybe some kind of event, maybe CBD is not
Right. If you're manic, you don't, because it increases your anandamide.
So
So
you
yeah, there's that.
also wanted to talk about getting patients their medicine and how hard it's been in New Jersey. So,
Yes.
what's the current status of the kind of products are available to people in New Jersey? When does recreation start? How's that going to affect medical patients? Because in many other states, medical programs disappear, unfortunately.
Right. Yes, because it's all about the almighty dollar, unfortunately, and medical patients get put by the wayside, and it's sad. Um, Here in New Jersey, there are not many dispensaries. I'm lucky enough to have a few near me. One is a smaller one that I personally would like to give them my business a little more than the bigger ones like Curaleaf. But that being said, there's New Jersey, while it's not a huge state, it's very densely populated, and recreational was just passed. But the Curaleaf and the other dispensaries that are here, they can't handle. So recreational is not, even though it's legal now, there's no access to us there. So they're also dealing with the grows, who's allowed to grow. They're only giving out 23, like I said, 23 dispensary licenses and
Commercial licenses? Are you talking about?
professionals. Yeah, for dispensaries, for
Right.
recreationals.
Okay, and so
Um,
the current medical dispensaries, Curaleaf and whatever, they
mhm.
are staying medical, or can.
For now,
Okay.
for now. Yeah, there's no way that they could handle the traffic if they opened it up to recreational, and we as medical patients would suffer because of that, because our products wouldn't be available.
And it's happening
Um,
everywhere else. So this is not conjecture. We've watched
yeah,
it happen, and it's a bad thing. So
yeah, and it's horrible. So and the other thing is, they're still trying to figure out what is going to be made available. Right now, edibles are not allowed here in New Jersey. We have lozenges, um, and we have topical oil, but it's basically a syringe of MCT oil. And I teach my patients how they could cook with that, how they can put it, in, the nighttime coffee, tea.
is it
Um,
carved already?
Pardon me?
Is it decarboxylated, that oil, or is it THCA?
No, it is decarboxylated. It is activated. Um, and and again, well, we can go into the whole, acidic form. Uh, that's not even, it's barely being addressed at the medical level. I mean, teaching, as far as teaching at the dispensaries, teaching people about how to use the acidic forms of THC and CBD, because it's incredible. And I try to teach my clients how to process, what I teach them, the QUET method of making their own tincture, and what machines to use, how to do it themselves. But because we can't have the edibles here, and it's just ridiculous. Pennsylvania doesn't allow edibles. But what I tell my people that take the lozenges is I have them munch it up in the front of their teeth
It's,
and then put it under their tongue so it will act sublingually. Or I tell them to take the lozenge and put it in hot tea and let the medication work that way, and explain to them that the difference of the onset of action is going to be completely different in those two methods.
there's a lot of water soluble cannabinoids coming out now. I did a show a couple weeks ago about some CBD, CBN, CBG that you can just mix into any liquid, and
Right.
very, your body just loves it that way, and sucks it up, and you get more of the cannabinoids that's not wasted by other.
My concern with that, though, is they're using nanotechnology to do that. And in doing so, I think, from what I've read, and correct me if I'm wrong, from what I've read, through that nanotechnology extraction, you're losing all of the whole plant benefits.
Well,
So that,
I don't know the answer to that, but I would suggest that you and other people listening go back 2 weeks and listen to Rick Dushin from soulinyou.com. And his claims are amazing, and I believe it. His nano emulsion technology is different than the ones that are encapsulated into a fat capsule. Okay, it's actually
mhm.
water soluble that is a dry powder instead of being a liquid that you would dose. So with the time we have left, and we have probably about 10 minutes or so,
Mhm.
how do we and you and I and other people educate the lawmakers who are making stupid laws because they don't know anything about this, and law enforcement and medical professionals. They all need to be educated about this plant.
Mhm.
Okay, so what are you doing? What are you doing for that? Obviously, you're working on doctors. It sounds like so.
Yeah, yes. I am partnering. Like I said, I'm partnering with another woman. Her name is Kat Schwartz, about getting the knowledge out there, educating people. I personally, because of COVID, unfortunately, I and my immune deficiency, even though I'm vaccinated, doubly vaccinated, it doesn't work as well in me. It's not as efficacious because I don't produce antibodies. Otherwise, I would be out there right in front of, in Trenton, and knocking on Cory Booker's door, who is an advocate, and he's actually written and co-hosted and sponsored the legalization and decriminalization laws that are here in New Jersey. So we are getting somewhere. The problem that we have is, again, access, compassionate care access for people that can't afford it. One of the projects that I'm working on is basically getting people who cannot afford their medication. So here in New Jersey, as a medical patient, we get 3 ounces a month. Well, some people may not use all of that 3 ounces. So why not take the remainder of what they're not using and put it and donate that? And this way we can donate it and not sell it to people who cannot afford their medication. Otherwise, it just goes to waste. And it's, it boggles my brain that it's okay for these people to go and spend all this money on opioids and other things that are not working, when we have access and people have leftovers that we can donate to people and give them their medicine. And I'm talking about, I'm also passionate about veterans, how they're very limited on funds, and they're not allowed at the VA to promote using marijuana.
Right.
And there are so many amazing strains for PTSD. There's so many different ways that they're using it and finding success. And I've seen documentaries of people that have come back from battle and had a gun in their mouth, and then decided to, for some reason, start cannabis, and they had their lives back. There's nothing more important than giving access to these people to have their medication instead of pushing a pharmaceutical on them. So that, obviously, you can see I'm extremely passionate about
I know.
and trying to figure that out.
I've heard that so many times over the last bunch of years. I did manage a dispensary for the first 2 years in New Mexico here. And so I've got a lot of experience talking to people and so forth. And one of the most common things, especially with veterans and the families of veterans, is that cannabis allowed me to get my life back.
Yes.
Now I have a normal life. My kids and my wife, they and my husband, whatever the case may be, it's a more normal now with cannabis. So
And I'm forgetting his name. I think I want to say it's Larry, Dr. Larry, down in Florida. Um, he's a psychiatrist, and he is doing cannabis guided therapy, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. And he also does ketamine and stuff like that. It works with psychedelics, but the cannabis aspect of it is amazing, because when you go in and you're using cannabis, your endocannabinoid system, we have an endogenous endocannabinoid system that is responsible for our homeostasis. And the majority, according to research, the majority of major depressive episodes, PTSD, are triggered by an endocannabinoid deficiency. So you're throwing all these other medications, anxiolytics, antidepressants, when the cannabis works so much better because it allows you to really hone in on your feelings where the others numb you. So
Mhm.
when you're going into a therapy session and your receptors are raw to allow your brain to accept the trauma, but in a more comfortable space within your mind, within your body. The success that people are seeing with cannabis guided therapy is amazing, and they're getting so much further along in that process. And like you said, family members, caretakers are saying, we have our family member back,
The crazy thing,
and it's the best.
it's incredible to hear that, because like you got a little verklempt there, and I understand that. So, but the amazing thing about what you just told us is that basically the psychiatric industry has been against cannabis. Okay, they've been campaigning against,
Hmm.
money against it, and so now that some of them are coming around and actually doing some therapy, that's quite amazing. I must say. Um, with the time we
Yeah.
with the time we have left, is there anything else you'd like to touch on? We probably have another 5 minutes or so. Uh,
Basically, I just think that we all need to use our voices, get out there and advocate as much as we can, um, educate, our doctors, our medical students. Um, I just, I can't scream it from the rooftops enough how this plant has changed my life, and many others. And I often go back and forth, and this was discussed before about whether we well, yes, it should be decriminalized, but whether we federally legalize it or just reschedule it. Um, it's a double-edged sword, because if we recreationally make it legal federally, I feel like big pharma is going to try and take over, and the mom and pop shops are going to get put out of business. The mom and pop growers, the OG people, and also we're not going to be as open to the studies. If it's deregulated and rescheduled, then those studies will be able to be done with real medical marijuana, not the crap that NIDA
they
is doing studies on.
actually, yeah, the crap from Ole Miss was crap. They couldn't get any kind of real studies. That those studies were not meant to prove, the greatness of cannabis. They were proved the negativity of cannabis.
Right.
But now I hear they've given out
Yeah.
licenses to new people to grow this cannabis. Sue Sisley, I believe, has one in Arizona, and she's going to be growing her own stuff for her PTSD studies and so forth. And it's very exciting. With the couple of minutes that we have left, traumatic brain injury. Okay,
Hmm.
it's really, really a lot of people get it from concussions and car accidents, or football players you were talking about the other day. So the science is telling us that cannabis does not burn our brain cells. It actually causes
Nope.
neurogenesis, which is the rebuilding of brain cells. So, what is your experience with any TBI patients, and what kind of regimen should they be on, and what should they be taking?
I am currently working with a TBI patient, and he was having a lot of seizures. He had a very bad car accident, I'd say about 20, 30 years ago. And I've known him since, I guess, middle school. And I can see the difference, and it's very frustrating for him. He's got some cognitive issues, but the seizures were also out of control. They couldn't figure out why he was getting them when he was getting them. They weren't grand mal, but enough to, it really went from whether it's just a gazing or completely being out and seizing. Um, that being said, the anti-epileptic meds that they gave him were making him numb, were making him tired. His fiance said, she was almost done. And we started, I talked to him, and it was very cost prohibitive because he's on SSDI. And I said, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you for free, um, because number one, I love him and I want to help. And within a day, his fiance was texting me. He got up early today. He was cleaning. He was doing things. He hasn't done this in like over a year. The next day, oh my gosh, he did more. He went out and gardened. by a week after, he had had 0 seizures.
Wow.
0. And is up and cleaning and doing things around the house. She's like, she cried to me. She's like, you gave me my fiance back. And he said to me, I didn't believe that it was going to do this. He goes, but it is.
Well,
And it's amazing.
maintenance is very important.
Yes.
With Lux, I lived with a woman for 25 years that had seizures, and it's not pleasant to be the watcher of those.
Mm-hmm.
How can people get a hold of you, Shele?
Well, I'm on Instagram, Shele Belly, SHELE BELLY on Instagram, and Shele Schell on SHELE SCHELL. I know it's a tongue twister on Facebook, and Class 420, which is the words class and the letters FOURTWENTY, is my website, which will be going live hopefully next week. We're just finishing up some tweaking, and I'll have upcoming events that I'm going to be doing. I'll be hosting some online webinars, anything from learning how to make your own gummies to teaching people about the endocannabinoid system, basically 101s for cannabis.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Shele. I appreciate your time, your expertise, your passion is over the top, and I look forward to doing this again sometime soon.
Likewise. And thank you for giving me a platform to speak and share, discussing this beautiful plant, this wonderful plant.
My pleasure. We'll be right back after this. Thank you, Shele.
This is the Medical Marijuana Radio Show with Larry Love.
Thank you, Shele.
Holla.
Also want to thank my 2 radio mentors, both with the initials HS. Thank you for your inspiration. If you'd like to be on the show, write us at info@mmjradio.com. Don't forget my Friday and Saturday night Late Night with Larawana show on Clubhouse, 12 a.m. East Coast, 9 p.m. on the West Coast. We'll be back again next time with another great guest. Thank you, everybody.
Whoa, whoa.